I'm going to start by reading a few poems from this new book, Tantalus in Love. First poem is called Space Dog. First poem I'm going to read. The Soviets sent a dog up into space in, I think it was 1958, and it was a border collie called Leica. And they raised the dog, fed it, pampered it, loved it, and then put it into a rocket ship and sent it out of the world with no intention of ever bringing it back. And I remember when I was a kid seeing, hearing about this on the news, and then seeing cartoons of Leica, little drawings in the newspaper and things like that, and thinking that in a way that this was a lot like childhood and a lot like being raised by your parents. So that's where the poem comes from. The occasion is watching a 13-year-old boy study his body in the mirror. And it's called Space Dog. As if amazed it's his, he holds his hand up before the mirror. Hand too big now for the boy's body. Hand he's turning slowly, front to back to front, then closes slowly to a fist he just as slowly opens like an exotic flower to its full extent. The boy, so newly merged with the emerging man, it's hard to say what's boy or man, but for the eyes, the boyish, rapt confusion in the look he looks with at his mobile features as he draws a blunt finger over the shadow of hair along his upper lip. Shadow of hair in armpit, crotch, voice deeper than it was, then higher, deeper, while the eyes, astounded, furtive, are the eyes of someone who cannot quite wake up from the dream in which he suddenly discovers he is naked among a crowd of strangers. Or like the eyes of Leica, Soviet space dog in an old drawing I remember, the stunned, not yet distrusting, but no longer trusting look from within the comical glass bubble of the gawky helmet, tilted atop the comical white spacesuit as the spaceship hurtles out toward the stars, the Earth a star behind it, the earnest dog eyes fixed on black space like a door the masters have walked through and will return from, surely. Surely they'll come to get me. Surely they didn't love me all that time for this. And now a love poem that sort of alludes to the scene in the Odyssey when Odysseus goes to the underground and offers the, I think, blood of an ox to the ghost so they can speak to him. A poem is called Ghost Watch. The blood pooled in the fresh fosse, and up they drifted out of Erebus, like smoke from every side, in a listless swarming all around Odysseus, crowding, pressing, merging together, a cloud bank of souls that swirled back as one when he lifted his sword, and then as one surged even closer toward him when he lowered it, their cries unearthly, the very echoes of them echoing for the blood drink they would drink and know him by and speak their recognitions. But it was otherwise for us. It was the blood surge and the rising heat, the flurry and grasp and cry of entering deeper into one another that drove the ghosts off, that harried them from us, dead husband and ex-wife, and the lovers before them, and before the lovers, even the Gorgon shadow of parental hovering, gone in the little clearing that our passion made, until we fell back, breathless, apart, and they swarmed up out of hiding, edging closer as the pulse died down, and they were there beside us, angry, wanting their own back now. This is a slightly longer poem. It's called Super Bowl Party, and it's just really a poem about a bunch of middle-aged people getting together and having a party on Super Bowl Sunday, and people whose pasts are overlapping in all kinds of interesting, intense ways. I think that's really all you need to know. It's called Super Bowl Party. And this was a few years ago, so the two teams referred to are the Oakland Raiders and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the Raiders got killed. Super Bowl party. Under the street lamp, Cars glistened end to end, clogging the cul-de-sac and driveway, and even the front yard of the small house whose windows were shadowy with friends you wanted me to meet. And in the house, the game glowed from the big screen, and we, in different phases of our middle age, milled about it, drinks in hand, watching, not watching, drifting from small talk to smaller talk, eyes shifting from the changed formations, the timing routes, the thud of impact, to whomever it was we talked with, and then beyond them, slyly, now and again to others in the room, whose eyes were just as slyly glancing at us without appearing to. The game glowed from another, smaller screen in the bright kitchen, where Anne, your dearest friend with MS, who'd broken up with Tim the week before because he drank too damn much and she was sick of it, was fixing him a drink. And where the beautiful, gaunt woman with high cheekbones that were higher, more beautiful for the gauntness, the bald head, leaned against her husband through the evening under the blunt lighting she must have surely felt too looked at in. For hadn't there been rumors of a brief affair, his moving out, then in again, and when she got sick, so that it almost seemed their every gesture of affection and solicitude, which all of us found so touching, could have been not only a late imperiled flowering of old devotion, but defiance, too, of us, of what they knew we knew, the very ones they charmed all evening, leaning her head against his chest, his hand all evening on her shoulders. The game glowed from the big screen. The underdogs were running up the score. My eyes were shifting from the adjustments, the audibles, the cut-back moves, to you in what phase of desire, what entangling shadows, seeing for the first time in years the ex who cheated on you and deceived you, and who now was joking with the very man you briefly left him for, before his change of heart that just as soon as you returned. What shadowy hunger of what understory of relation on the periphery of your attention kept you silent even when the streaker streaked across the field and held up play as someone beside us muttered, "That's as close to scoring as we're going to get." Thicket of phases, unspoken relations of our middle age, the game glowed nearly over. We didn't know Anne had disappeared with Tim into the bedroom till she, flushed and laughing in a silver and black dress in honor of the losing team, emerged unsteadily, drink in one hand, the other holding onto Tim's sleeve. And if you wondered why she hadn't warned you that your ex would be there, if you thought in her unhappiness she might have grudged you this new happiness with me, despite her love for you, because of it, you wouldn't say. And I too could not have told the difference then between affection and a demonstration of affection. Affection as defiance or revenge or courtesy, when in full view of him, you put your arm around me, leaned your head against my shoulder, and whooped and cheered more loudly than the others, as Anne, clinging to Tim with one hand, drink raised in the other, to the losing team, paraded giddily from living room to kitchen, back to living room, in that halting, brave, toddler half-step way of hers that all of us have lately noticed getting so much worse. And another poem about being 50 and falling in love again. It's actually inspired by a photograph that a friend of mine took of an iris with a beautiful gaudy blossom on the top and then older blossoms along the stalk kind of falling away, shriveling up and dying. And it just sort of, poem just sort of places that next to an incident where looking through some old photo albums and a picture falls out of the sleeve of my current wife with her first husband on their honeymoon. So it's just what happens when you marry someone roughly your own age. Anyway, as you should. Anyway, the poem is called Iris. Love flower of the middle-aged, the interanimating pain and beauty in the way the stalk bends under the unexpected weight of the still uncrumpling gaudy tissue of the newest blossom, while the lower blossoms, like a ghostly time lapse in reverse, appear to shrivel into themselves and turn away forlorn before they fall, the way the snapshot fell from its sleeve into her lap. And there she was, my new love with her old love years before, beside a lake with blue hills in the distance, rolling down to bluer water. And there they were, the lovers, naked, hand in hand, both smiling back at me, a smile of joy so new, so mischievous. You couldn't look at it and not believe no lovers ever gave themselves so freely to each other. The flower bends under the blossom's weight. It trembles, bending, it almost seems to hold it up, as if to hold it there forever. Its one and only darling, honey child, how did I ever live without you? How could I ever let you go? And I'm going to read some new poems for the remainder of this reading. Let's see. Some that I've never read before. They're not, I mean, they've been written a couple years ago, but I've never read them. Some I have read before. It's many, many years ago, almost 30 years ago, I was in a Chinese restaurant in San Francisco, and I overheard a couple in the next booth. I was with my first wife. I overheard a couple in the next booth having a fight, and all you could hear was just the rhythms of fighting, not the actual words. And then the woman said something to the guy that I always wanted to get into a poem, and tried many different times to do so, and could never do it successfully, and finally figured out how to do it. It's just a really interesting line. And so the poem is about that, and it's called Egg Rolls. So, imaginative title, Egg Rolls. The gregarious couple muffled the sharp words the couple in the next booth were trying all through dinner not to have. Only an occasional, no, you listen for a change, or how dare you, or I can't believe this, would rise above the barely suppressed staccato, please God, not now, not here, rhythm of an argument they wanted both to swallow and spit out. Then the pause, the momentary silence in which the whole place seemed to be listening to the woman say at last, clearly and slowly, so everyone could hear, it's not the egg rolls, Harry, it's the last 10 years. Oh, Harry, can you forgive them, the young couple in the next booth who laughed out loud, but really did try not to? Surely you heard them. How could you not have, as you ran past, hurrying after her, your disappearing wife? And though it's nearly 30 years since then, would it console you now to learn they didn't last a year, that couple? And even that night, although they strolled home hand in hand, a little less estranged for all the laughter you occasioned, even after making love and meaning it and lying back, no part of either of them touching now, they heard they couldn't help but lie there wide awake and hear the couple from the next apartment who, for all they knew, could have been you and her, go at it longer, louder, deeper into the night than they themselves had ever thought was possible. This poem is called Anybody, and it's the title, and with a question mark. It's the title is supposed to be spoken the way a teacher might say it after asking a question of a class and having nobody answer, and waiting and waiting, and then saying, anybody? So that's the title of the poem. And it's one of the few poems of mine that are actually set outdoors. And I guess you'll see why most of my poems are not set outdoors when you read it. It's called Anybody. Some dead thing scent led me across the pasture, into a drifting maze of early mist, past where the horses graze, among the horse scent of grasses, in the tall grass, faint, but never fainter, never less distinct. Where is it? Is it there? And what? And why? The day's first quiz. The day, fairest of teachers, patient because at ease, with time to kill, floating the questions, letting them hang in the air while far away across the valley a dog barks and a child is laughing, and higher up the mist burns down to thin smoke in the crease of hills. I found this poem in a footnote in William James's Varieties of Religious Experience. It's pretty much a slightly adapted account of a dream that one of the women he interviews tells him. And it's really just mostly, I made some changes, but it's mostly just lifted out of the footnote. And it's a dream of, it's a dream of a kind of being overwhelmed by God. Though in my handling of the poem, it's more like just history or being. Title of the poem is People Get Ready. I couldn't tell you where the Lord was traveling, only that I knew he was by how the lightning flashed under his footfall the way a rail does under a wheel. He was traveling on a rail of lightning made entirely of souls, and I was there among them. I was one of them, invisible, uncountable, suspended moment in an endless line. And when it was my turn to flash awake into my short existence under the pressure of his heel, I knew my anguish was the very way he moved, how he could get where he was going, though what the purpose of his going was, I couldn't see. I saw relentlessness, not purpose. I saw how he went, not where. And as he passed, I saw he no more thought of me than a train thinks of the sparks scattering under its iron weight, bright then dark. Another poem about, well, actually, no, I'll read this. Read these two first. Yeah, I'll read this first. This is called Dog and Owner. It's about those Abu Ghraib pictures that we discovered a couple of years ago. It's less about the horror of the pictures than the horror of than the horror of my own fascination with the pictures. So it's more about the sort of pornography of it, as well as about the politics. It's called Dog and Owner, and it's in two parts. What's obvious, part one, what's obvious is what surprises. That the naked man made to look like a dog, with dog collar and leash, looks more like a dog than a man caught in a sex game, or threatened with lynching, or dragged like meat across the floor. A dog who's just now rolled in something which so engrosses him that for the moment of the picture, he doesn't realize he's been yanked back. What? That's what his look says. And the soldier who holds the leash as if she were the owner of the dog looks like the owner of a dog. Her casual t-shirt tucked into fatigues, tucked neatly into boots, dog owner on a morning stroll, this morning a bit distracted, thinking maybe about the day ahead or last night, what she should have done or did, and so fails to notice what the dog is doing till it's too late, and she has to jerk the leash hard to pull him back, letting his lead go slack. The moment of the picture when you almost hear her saying, stern but not unkindly, "Come on now, boy, let's go. The fun is over." 2. The mind strains to sniff the delicious stink of outrage, stink of pleasure, of not suffering that, of doing that, of being done to that way. Irresistible stink of the mind that the mind strains not to nuzzle into, roll on, lap up, the taut leash jerking it harder and harder. What? Okay, I will read another poem about, I'll sort of finish with a couple of love poems. The first one is another poem about being my age, being in the 50s. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's called The 50s Dance. And everybody is dancing to 50s music, and everybody also happens to be in their 50s. So, 50s Dance. We're dancing near the stage when she notices me noticing her staring at the lead singer. She smiles and says, "He looks like Jay, the ex-lover Clint Eastwood twin." Her tone's so casual I can't help think it isn't. So I say, "You mean the Barry Manilow look-alike?" And she says, "Yeah, right," meaning, "Whatever you say, dear," as her eye takes in again the tall physique, the loose blouse and pajama bottoms, the rugged face, more rugged somehow for the graying ponytail, and soft voice, soft but clear but ardent, singing, wandering in the daylight, searching for you with a flashlight. I pull her close. I ask, "But seriously, if he'd been more available, you'd have stayed with that guy, right?" She says, "You mean if he'd been a different person?" Spinning away till I draw her back to ask what comes out as a statement. "But if not for that, he'd have been your ideal man," meaning in bed, his body. And she says, smiling, patting my cheek, "No, honey, I married you, didn't I? You're the sexiest man I've ever been with." It's not supposed to be funny. The compliment itself, a complicated dance of irony and affection, doo-wop of late passion, as is the thumbs up I smiling offer in return, and the laugh we laugh then, grateful and edgy, too knowing not to be, yet fresher for what it knows, and stranger to. And as we dance, I lip sync to the singer who I am and am not mocking now, my head thrown back like his, my eyes like his half closed, better to see in daylight with a flashlight how her eyes could fix on mine, on me, unable ever to tear itself away. And it's just 3 short love poems and then a final poem. There's a wonderful, actually just a little fragment of Sappho's that's just part of a simile. I don't know it by heart. Jim, you probably would know it, but it's just about the apple reddening in the tree. It's just too high, overlooked by the pickers, or too high for them to pick. And that's it. That's as far as it goes. And so I wanted to sort of incorporate the poem into a poem, and at the same time have it be sort of a broken simile in and of itself. So this is the poem. It's called Harvest. As an apple hangs in a fragment of a sentence in an ancient poem, in the book you've made me turn face down on the bedside table, your blouse now half unbuttoned, as the apple reddens in the broken simile, the second half of which was lost how many centuries ago. As the apple shines more brightly for the lost lines in the topmost branches, missed by the pickers or too high for them to reach, untouched, unfalling, trembling forever on the trembling branch beyond the outstretched fingers, while you shiver slightly as the blouse falls, first this sleeve, then the other from your shoulders. And then another poem. There's in Pompeii on one of the there's a street called Via dell'Abbondanza, which is translated Easy Street, that had billboards. People wrote poems and messages on walls, and one of the messages was a little poem, a line of which was "Passion runs off like rain." So I just sort of incorporated that into a poem as well. It's called Easy Street. 1,000 years from now, they'll dig us up. They'll find us here like this, like anyone. They'll hurry to copy down the words before the plaster crumbles at the touch of air, raining ashes on the words, someone not as lucky in love as we were, scrawled on the wall outside our window along the Via dell'Abbondanza. Passion runs off like rain. Rain coming on so suddenly that we stop to listen, holding each other, a couple suddenly entombed, for all we know, beneath a rain of ash from the exploding mountain. And now the last poem I'm going to read is called Old War. It's set in Dublin. I went to Dublin in 1974, which coincided with one of the the last terrorist bombs to go off in Dublin, and to this day nobody knows who was responsible, whether it was the IRA or the Provisional Army, the Protestants, or the British for that matter. But it did blow up near downtown, near Trinity College. It blew out the windows of Trinity College and maimed many people, killed many people. And I was there, I was just graduated from college and was there to read poetry, to study poetry, to write. And I hadn't thought about that incident till we went to war, and this is just a kind of lyric that tried to mimic certain 16th century English poets, particularly Thomas Wyatt, whom I discovered while I was living in Ireland that year. And it quote in the poem one of the lines from They Flee From Me Who Sometime Did Me Seek, the line, "But dear heart, how like you this, when a man falls into the woman's arms and softly did me kiss and whisper, dear heart, how like you this." And so the poem is really just a kind of lament for that it's lament for the fact that it's so that love poetry doesn't have a more consequential role in the world. So it's called Old, or How Difficult It Is. In a way, it's like my version of the Yeats poem about asked to write a political poem, but oh, that I was young again and held her in my arms, and rather do that than write a poem about war, as would anybody, any sane person. So the poem's called Old War, and this will be the last poem I read. Where is the bower? Inside what book? Beside which window? In an ancient city I went to more than 30 years ago. Where is the bower? The bright mesh made from the names of flowers I, beyond the page, could not identify. Where is the bower? The loosened tress, the laugh, the eager rustle of the hand that slips the thin strap from the willing dress, and as it falls, the dear heart, how like you this, plain courtesy of wanting what is wanted when it is. Oops, I lost the second page. And when the bomb exploded and the window shattered in a silver shower as oddly pretty as any in the bower, a silver shower showering red over the words that told how birdsong answered birdsong everywhere overhead. And everyone who could was running while the bloody page went fluttering out into the city where the old war raged. Where was the bower? And where is it now? And how do I get back to where the dress is falling, but not yet on the ground? Thank you all for listening.